I am Dan Brier. I'm the General Manager of Farming Excellence with Beef and Lamb New Zealand. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for coming off farm. Appreciate that it's always a little bit of a challenge to drag yourself away and come in for something like this. And so really do thank you for your time coming and being here. If you're anything like this, Alan's sick of hearing about how much I'm hoping that it's raining in the Waikato at the moment, but fingers crossed. Apparently we've got 6 mils coming at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so holding out for that. Right, so the Informing New Zealand Beef Program, thanks very much for coming along. Alan sort of talked about the value of genetics for us as an industry in New Zealand in particular. And so I just wanted to show this slide, which talks about the size of the prize and why we're working on this program. We know that genetics is really important, as Alan mentioned, and we've seen the improvement across the sheep industry. What these slides here show, and I'll try and point them out, but along the top number there, 16.7, that's 16.7 is a few years ago, but that's the size of the dairy industry in New Zealand. This work was done by Abacus. The sheep 4.4 and beef 1.3. The genetic gain down the bottom is the key bit, right? So the dairy industry improves at about 1.8% per year. And that's because of as you guys all know, the structure of the dairy industry where they've got a few bulls serving so many cows. Sheep industry doing really well, and so some of that's the good work that those evaluations do. It's because of the shorter generation interval and increased selection intensity of sheep. But the beef industry is lagging. And so, as I say, this was a few years ago, but this is where this is the size of the prize. This is why we're here, to try and improve that rate of gain and underpin profitability on New Zealand sheep and beef farms. Right, so what's our job? Our job is to increase the rate of genetic gain in the industry. It's pretty simple. It's a nice North Star, and the Beef and Lamb New Zealand genetics team have been working on it for several years. We do it through promoting the use of genetic improvement tools, things like EBVs. We do it through improving the access and visibility of genetics and genetic potential for farmers, and so this is where something like Improve is so important, right? And finally, that will lead to increasing demand for genetically superior animals. So we're creating that positive flywheel where farmers are going out and looking for good bulls. They're coming to you as breeders, or you're going to your breeder looking for those better bulls, and that's encouraging that positive flywheel where we're seeing improvement across the industry. And so that's why we're very excited to have Improve for Beef launched today. So discover genetics fit for your purpose at improve.nz. It's been a bit of a labour of love, to be fair, and a key plank of capturing the genetic improvement that I mentioned. A couple of things to think about Improve. We've built it for commercial farmers. Stud breeders are welcome to use it for whatever they want as well, but the primary audience of this is the commercial farmers. The most important decision for a commercial farmer is not which bull to buy, it's which driveway to go up. So this is very much about helping a beef farmer find a beef breeder who's got the same objectives as they do. We've really focused in on the adult learning. So Alan mentioned a little earlier, the chatbot, those things we're doing to really try and make sure that adults, I don't know about you, but as slower learners than perhaps we used to be, to try and encourage the better uptake of this. So a really key bit is that it's the same, or very much the same, as Improve for sheep. So there's not a whole lot of new skills that you need to learn to be able to pick up Improve for beef. We don't have Google's user experience budget to build this, and so the work that David and the Map of Ag team and others have done to try and make sure that farmers can use this really well has been really, really important. It's also really important because it means, as Alan was talking about, farmers learning from farmers, that rural professionals and farmers and others can show your clients how to use it without needing a massive training program to go around it as well. And it's by farmers for farmers. So throughout the process and the life of this program, we've been really worked very closely with farmers to keep an eye on what they're doing, try and help them understand how to use it. David and his team have been quite careful at watching how farmers use it. They go to workshops and they have mock-ups of this thing, and they watch where people put their finger, and they watch where they get stuck, and they watch what they're trying to find out, all of the way through, trying to make sure that we can make that user experience as seamless and easy and useful as possible. Oh, sorry, I'm pushing the wrong button here. I just grabbed these real quickly. This is some insights from our Improve for Sheep. So a couple of key numbers on there. The 3,800. This is in the last 12 months, how many people have logged into Improve commercial farmer sheep. So nearly 4,000 people across New Zealand have logged into that in 12 months. Really key piece is that 17,000 sessions. So what that means is that those people are going back to it. Repeat customers are valuable in any business, and so we've got people, they're obviously getting value from Improve for Sheep because they're going back to it. And then the next number, they're spending 7 minutes per time on it. So people aren't just dropping in saying this is a waste of my time and dropping out. People are going back, they're getting real value from this. So really, really pleased with that. The graph on the left-hand side, the number to look at, or the line to look at there, the purple line and the pink line. The pink line was the year before. The purple line is the most recent year. So we're seeing people using it, we're seeing them going back to it, they're spending time on it, and year on year there's more and more people using it. So all really good indicators that people are getting great value out of that. That's 17,000 eyeballs, or 34,000 eyeballs, that will be able to look at Improve for Beef with one click. So really pleased that that's working so well, and it really adds weight to the argument of putting this and putting your information there for commercial farmers to find. All right, so it's been a journey though, right? So I think it's always really important to stop and make sure that we think about this in the context of what we've done and where we're going to as well. So it started with SIL, Sheep Improvement Limited, which was, I'm not sure, there's people here before me, but 15 or 20 years ago, where we brought together the evaluations around the country, put that data together and showed and learned that the value of combined data for genetic evaluations to improve the industry. B+LNZ Genetics through from about 1912 through 1918, 2012, 2018, stepped that up and started into the process of building Improve, moving out of SIL and the JADE system. Again, it brought together, it started up the progeny tests, people like Max Tweedy waving the flag for beef in the genetics program. RNPP, the Red Meat Profit Partnership, had a hand in it, and building the commercial farmer screens that we see through, that we've now transferred over to beef. Also, a big chunk of that user experience piece came out of the RNPP work. And now into the INZB program, where we have taken what we've learned and developed over those historical pieces and brought them together for you today for Improve for Beef. And so those cogs working together really nicely and building into a product which is going to help drive this industry. But further, we're still building more. So this wee logo there is our Cool Sheep. So this is our low methane sheep program. And what's happening there is obviously there's a genetics piece around low methane sheep, but we're also building a system, or planning to build a system, where we can track genetics moving across the industry or within your farm, if you want to, genetics and genetic gain. And that's going to be really valuable for people who want to prove to their customers or whatever that they've got low methane credentials in their flock, but also works exactly the same for any trait. So as soon as we've done the methane, if we choose to, we'll be able to roll that over to meat quality or facial eczema or anything else which is hard to measure and hard to get penetration across the industry. Dairy calf opportunities, so I'll talk a bit more about this later on, but this is a work that we've got in train with DairyNZ and the wider dairy industry. The key bit of that from an Improve point of view and for you guys is that we really want to figure out how we can communicate genetic value up and down the supply chain. So we've got some of the pieces that fit into that with the INZB program, but we really would love to be able to get to the stage where what a consumer wants is communicated back through your meat company, through your finisher, through the calf rearer, through the dairy farmer, and back as far as a stud breeder, so that we can we can hook that circle together and get much faster and better information moving through the supply chain. We've got cool beef in the train as well, right? And so this will take some of those things that we've talked about in cool sheep and leverage those over. Really key out of the cool beef program, if and when we get that stood up, is linking feed conversion efficiency into methane and to New Zealand beef system. We're probably going to get to the stage, working with AgResearch on some of these other tests, some of these proxies for methane, we're going to get to the stage where we're using a methane test to find feed-efficient animals for a cheaper and more effective way than doing it through feedlots. So all of these things add together to carry on building and creating a system that allows you as beef farmers and your customers as commercial farmers to be really successful. So I think those cogs are well. So the Informing New Zealand Beef Program. So I'm just going to take a few minutes just to run through the actual program before I talk about the dairy beef. All right, so I'll get my notes here so I don't get too lost. Right. Let me get back. So we organised it into five different projects. Unfortunately, that colour makes it pretty tough to read on there, right? So the first one, developing the New Zealand indexes, new traits and data measurement. Progeny tests in the commercial herds, Project 3, Project 4, data management and the genetic evaluation, and finally, industry uptake and program management. So Project 1's largely done, and Jason, I'm sure, will be talking about indexes, wherever Jason is, later on today, so no need to cover that. Project 2 is where we've been working on new traits and establishing the standardised trait measurements. So key work there has been fertility traits, using cow manager, data collection tags, body condition scoring and udder scoring. We have developed the body condition score research evaluation using information out of the data, out of the progeny test, and we're just starting to work on validating that now. We've also done that groundwork that's led to the beef methane project and developed protocols for parasite resistance in cattle. We're just figuring out with the parasite resistance in cattle, we're just figuring out what our next steps are there at the minute. Progeny tests. So we've carried on with the progeny test at Pamu's Kepler farm in Te Anau and Ramanui's Lochinvar up on the Napier Taupo Road. 30 bulls came into this most recent, were nominated for the most recent mating, which is excellent. We're also running the dairy beef progeny test. It's not part of the INZB program, but we are continuing to run the dairy beef progeny test, and we've expanded that to 4 different sites this year, out from just the one that we've had previously. We've wrapped up the original progeny tests and collected the data out of those, and thanks to those people and properties that made that possible, and I know some of you are here, so Rangataik, Kabawhai, Tautani, Whangarā and Menda Pills. The commercial herd program's going on, and great to see so many people from the commercial herd program here. These are the herds that will collect data and feed it back into the system. The goal to be able to use their data to inform stud level information on things like maternal carcass traits. So far with this information combined with the progeny test data, there's some numbers there, but we've actually got over 25,000 genotypes in our databases now on 50,000 and data on 50,000 individual animals. So those data sets are getting really big and powerful and useful when we start thinking about how we use the evaluations. Project 4 is where all the heavy software development that you've seen today has gone into. As well as improve though, we've also been working on these evaluations. Some of those are for our progeny test data, some are for the commercial farmers program, and some are across the industry. So the body condition scoring one, for example. Multi-breed, we're working on it. So this is the ability to compare animals across breeds. Commercial farmers, when we survey them, this comes up that they want us to do this or try and figure out how that we can do this for them. So we're still working on a fair and cost-effective way to achieve that. Project 5 is the extension and project management part of the program. So we've got those Better Beef workshops. I think we had 20 in the last year. We've done an artificial insemination cost-benefit calculator for commercial farmers thinking about whether they should be spending 10 or 20 or however much $1,000 they spend on a bull versus doing AI. where we've landed there is that from the program's point of view, we've done this calculator, but that's really as much time and energy as we're going to spend on that for commercial farmers. We think that there's a better bang for our buck helping them make better decisions around the bulls they're buying than pushing too hard into getting more people using artificial insemination on commercial farms. Alan mentioned Bella, our chatbot. So the real key there is, right, we're moving to this place where you don't have to go looking for information anymore. Information can come to you when you want it and where you want it. So we all carry an encyclopedia around in our pocket. The tricky bit's been getting the page out of the encyclopedia that I want. So these chatbots and these artificial intelligences are becoming much, much cleverer. And I see Sarah sitting there. I'm always reminded of Sarah's AI catalogue interview, right? So these things are getting cleverer and cleverer, and so we're in there. But we want to make sure that that information is actually useful to you. So we don't want it hallucinating, as Alan says, on Norwegian sheep flocks in winter. We want it to be looking into our knowledge hub and finding out that information. And obviously improve, which we'll cover off. Right, so dairy calf opportunities. It seemed a bit silly to come to a beef workshop and not talk about dairy beef. Great. And so I just wanted to let you know about a project that we're working on with the dairy industry. These beef on dairy is becoming a big deal around the world. These are cattle on a feedlot in Canada. I'm pretty sure they were born in California. And they look every bit the part, those dairy beef cattle there. First thing to think about in New Zealand is why our situation, even though beef on dairy is a big deal around the world, interesting to think about why our situation is different to the other. So across the top line there, that's the number of dairy cows in each country. Our major competitors, so New Zealand nearly 5 million, Australia 1.5 million, Ireland 1.6, the US a bit under 10 million. And then the next line is the percentage of dairy cows of total cows and calves. So essentially that's the ratio of dairy cows to beef cows in the herd. So in New Zealand we're at 83%. Whereas the rest of those countries have a much bigger beef herd, so they've got much more capacity to soak the dairy calves into their business. The US has got 28 or 29 million cows. Well, it's going down a little bit at the minute, but 28 to 29 million cows at pasture, beef cows at pasture. So what that means is the next line down is the number of calves that need to find a home, right? 1.8 million bobby calves last year in New Zealand, which is a heck of a lot of calves. The other places have got their own challenges. In USA, they have to freight those little calves for a super long way. In Ireland, they export them across into Europe as velas. And in Australia, they have an incredibly high on-farm death rate. So all that means is that we've got a lot of calves to deal with. So we've put this project together with Dairy NZ, with DCANZ, which is the dairy company's sort of peak body, and essentially Fonterra's a big player in that, as you can imagine, and the Meat Industry Association representing the meat companies. And there's three things to this, right? Pillar one is about improving the quality of the beef that's coming out of our sector. So there's obviously a genetics piece, making sure that we've got the good work that people like Ben are doing to make sure we've got better bulls going into those dairy herds. Rearing, and we all know what a challenge calf rearing is in the New Zealand situation. A third of calf rearers turn over every year because they never make any money. They get squeezed 4 years out of 5. It's pretty hard work being a calf rearer. And then that piece at the bottom there, greater integration, that's code for that piece of how we're shifting information up and down the supply chain, so that rather than going to the sale yards and valuing calves based on the colour of their feet, we can value it on the colour of their or the quality of their genetics. In Ireland, and the marts with their dairy calves, they have this commercial beef index that goes up on the wall, and people pay more for calves with a higher commercial beef index. Second bit is how we get less calves born in New Zealand. So this will be a Dairy NZ-led piece. So they're looking into things like extended lactation, so milking cows for longer than 12 months, maybe milking them through 18 months or for 24 months. Obviously, if you milk for longer, you have less calves. It's probably only a marginal thing, but really important for particularly the Jersey herds, right? The people who are really going to struggle to find a home for their calves. Also, mating programs to make sure that if they're using sex semen, for instance, that they're picking the right cows and then putting beef to the rest, all those sorts of things. And then the third bit is a really interesting piece for mine, which is finding a new product for younger beef. So if we're going to farm an extra, I don't know, 500,000 or 1 million cattle, there's not an extra 100,000 hectares lying around just waiting to be used. So we're going to have to kill these animals at a different age or process them at a different age. And so this is the idea here, is to be very market-led, find a market, produce some products, figure out what the meat companies need to do differently or the processors will need to do differently, and then back to the farm, what we need to do differently on farm to serve that need. So a really interesting and joined up project. It's, as I said, $40 million with government at the moment to decide if they're going to fund it. My view on whether they're going to do that changes on about a weekly basis. But at the moment it's looking really positive. And I guess back to this conversation, a really key piece, or the next piece, of how we make sure that we continue adding value and leveraging your money to get the best for sheep and beef farmers. There's obviously a real opportunity here, right, for sheep and beef farmers in terms of these new products and what this might be. Right. And so just to wind up, some thank yous. So Alan alluded to it, that putting this together has been a really collaborative effort. When I started with Beef and Lamb New Zealand Genetics, which was about 6 years ago, just as the MB funding for Beef and Lamb Genetics wound up, it's fair to say that we had a fairly low trust environment between Beef and Lamb and the breed societies. So over the last few years, it's been excellent to work with many of you and many of your society members to build that up and get us to here. So a huge thank you to all of those people who we've dragged off farm and dragged up to Wellington Airport for long meetings and evening meetings and all of those things. So a huge thank you to the people who have put your time and effort into that. Of course, there's the data and software people, so thank you to Andrew and your team at Map of Ag for the software development, also PPB and ABRI for those channels and the work that's gone in on your end to make sure that we get this data flow across to us for Improve. And of course the funders. So MPI and the New Zealand Meat Board have both put money into this alongside Beef and Lamb, which is crucial. And that government funding reminds me, back where I had the COGs, I reckon that of all of those projects, the government's probably paid more than 50% of that all of the way through. So there's been a really strong investment from New Zealand into our genetics program, which is valuable, and we thank them for that. Right, and so that's us. Finally, we've got one last person, and so I really just want to acknowledge the effort that David Campbell's put into this for us. Now, David doesn't like being in the limelight, so apologies, David. But you know, very much what we're seeing here is David's vision from 10 years ago, right, and the starting of this, making sure that it was set up that it could be across breeds and whole multi-species. When the rest of us had all had a bit of a guts full and thought that we'd done enough, David held the line, got out there, watched those farmers plugging away on the screens. And so a huge debt that we owe you, David. And so thank you for your effort on our behalf in pulling this together. Right, and that's me. So thanks very much for coming along. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate that appreciate the team who's put a lot of effort into pulling this together, and looking forward to a good day. Thanks, George.
So we'll just move on to the questions that are coming through, and keep those coming. Be good to see some that are directed at Alan. So maybe not so genetic type questions. So if you can think of some of those, that'd be good. But we'll start at the top there. Given the focus is increased genetic gain and how cost effective it is, surely there has to be a focus on commercial farmers utilising AI. Dan, I think that's for you.
Yeah. That's not okay. So yeah, good question, right? So as I said, we put a lot of thought and time into exactly that question. How do we set up a system or a program or a training scheme or something to help farmers, commercial farmers, use AI more on their herds? We had people, particularly from our project here, so Richard was there and others, who have done it on their commercial farms and had found what they found and what they didn't found, come together with us. And where we got to be honest, is that the return on investment for us in our time and for most commercial farmers is that it wasn't a great return on investment. And so, I mean, if I had squillions of dollars, maybe the answer would be yes, but for us, we've decided that that not focusing on it, giving the tools there so that with a calculator that a rural professional or a farmer who can try the computer can go and figure out for themselves whether it's right, is fine, but we're not going to spend time building programs. So that's a short answer, or long answer, short answer.
Next up, probably a fairly simple one, Dan. Does the end proof for Angus include Angus Pro breeders cattle?
No. So up until now in the project, we've worked very closely with those 4 breed societies whose name I had up there before, and so we've got their data coming into it. We do plan to bring other data streams into it as we, over the next many years, but at the moment Angus Pro is not on there.
Where is the new dairy beef project funding coming from, and will BLG lead the project?
So the funding is coming from those 4 parties. Most of it's coming out of the dairy industry, so the ratio is something like 25-75, something like that. It's Jim. So, yeah, so even more skewed towards the dairy than that. B+LNZ is going to be the lead contractor on that, so someone has to contract with MPI, and they can have that for all their sins. And then we'll contract into them. We'll look after that first pillar. That'll be run by Beef and Lamb New Zealand.
Which is half of the size of the project.
Yeah, which is half the size of the project. And I'd also note too, it's not just a genetics thing, right? So there's a genetics component in there, like our dairy beef progeny test, but there's also all of that calf rearing and on-farm farm system stuff as well.
Cool. Any more questions out there? I've just got one for you, Alan. You spoke around wanting to make a difference, and I'm just keen to hear your early thoughts after 4 months in the role. Where do you think the change could come to, bring some long-term sustainability and profitability to the sheep and beef sector?
Thanks, Warwick. 2 gents at the back there, if you want to find a seat, please get yourself comfortable. Good question. And I don't have the answer yet, but it certainly keeps me awake. But one of the reasons for coming to events like this is to get farmer input into that. But it seems to me, if I look at almost any other value chain in the world, it's aligning, if you like, the raw material to the processor to the ultimate customer is where you need to look. So look at the entire value chain. I know we've got a couple of representatives from the processor industry here, Melissa from Silverfern Farms and Gray from Alliance. If I look at what the kiwi fruit industry does in terms of being very, very focused about what great looks like from the customer point of view, the consumer point of view rather, or what the apple industry does in terms of, we want something that's crisp, but we put 8 calcium sprays on it so it doesn't have bitter pit, or we're looking at the bricks of kiwi fruit. What can we do in the sheep and beef industry to decommoditise the product so that all in the value chain can get a greater share of that? And then our job at Beef and Lamb is to aid through research, through extension, us getting that raw material to the processor to meet their demands for their customers and ultimately their consumers. That's it in a nutshell. But it would be fair to say I don't feel as though I'm cracking that yet.
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the dairy beef work you're doing, how much do dairy farmers listen to Beef and Lamb, and how much is B+LNZ helping you trying to get those messages across to dairy farmers?
That's an excellent question. So you're talking specifically about dairy beef and breeding in those. Yep.
Yeah, trying to use better beef bulls on dairy cows.
Yep. So first off, the dairy beef progeny test has been successful in doing that, right? So we've started that conversation, if you like, that the value of these bulls. And it's also the value of this collaboration, which is not about us speaking at dairy farmers. It's Fonterra speaking to dairy farmers and B+LNZ talking to dairy farmers about these things. Obviously, this is the great thing about that. Well, academically, the great thing about the bobby calf problem is it's such a wicked problem. There's so many problems, so many places where it breaks down, where the dairy farmer just wants a short gestation and get their calf out of my hair. The beef farmer doesn't want to be stuck with some broken-faced calves that he can't sell when it turns dry. Like all of those problems that we all know about. This is why we need to work across the industry to try and solve it, rather than beef and lamb saying, just buy a beef bull, someone will buy your calves, and then someone uses valuable semen and there's no market, and so then they get annoyed and don't come back to doing it next year. All of those things, like it's such a linked together problem, which is why that I really think that value of that cross collaborative project that we put together is so valuable, Robert, because we can talk blue in our face about beef stuff and the dairy guys can talk blue in the face about their dairy stuff, but until we put it together with the processes, and people like Fonterra are saying we see a real risk in having 1.8 million bobby calves every year. We need all of those things to come together at the same time to help drive behaviour change. Does that answer your question?
And Dan.
Oh yeah, sorry, and I would just note, to Alan's point, 80% of our levy comes from dairy farmers, right? So there's real, 80%, I think 70% of all beef that's killed in New Zealand started its life on a dairy farm.
Dan, just another question along the same lines. Are you working with organisations like LIC, and do you know what they are doing regarding dairy beef genetic improvement?
Yep. So we're working with LIC. They're I'm not sure, they're not a cash contributor into that program, but they're working alongside. One of the reasons that we've changed around how the progeny test, the dairy beef progeny test, is set up is to allow other parties to come into that and get value out of it. And we're trying to work on that protocol that allows other people to test bulls, put data together. The short answer is as much as we can, right? Some of these guys have got their own commercial drivers, and we encourage that for them to try and drive their own business. But absolutely, where we can, we're trying to work with those other organisations and the international ones as well.
Is there likely to be any more research into the production of male sex semen from the available beef bulls, as is happening in the US?
Not from us, is the short answer. I'm not sure if there's what research is going on in that space, but it's not something that we're funding.
You've probably covered this off, but given nearly 40% of the total beef levy is from dairy, what extension work does Beef and Land intend to do from its research insights of the dairy beef progeny test?
Yes, I think we've covered that off already. We don't just spend that levy into the dairy beef progeny test. It obviously goes into other things as well, including offshore things. But one of the key, rather than having different people saying different messages at dairy farmers, just like Improve, right? We want to reduce the number of those messages and simplify them. Working with B+LNZ is a really key piece of that.
And the last one here, I don't quite understand it. How do we work under the cap with dairy beef if we up our numbers?
I suspect that's either a nitrogen cap or a greenhouse gas cap. And in terms of if we've got more numbers coming on, then there's going to be potentially more emissions. I agree. Those are hard problems that we've got to try and figure out.
Cool. Yes, Alan, go.
One of the themes that comes through them questioning is a sense working together with other entities. Again, before I took the role, I saw the Common Ground report, and I just want to touch on that briefly, since working collaboratively seems to be a case in point. It makes a lot of sense because farmers are asked to pay levies to a number of entities, and the worst thing I think you want to happen with that levy payment is for duplication of resource. One of the many positives that I've seen coming into the role is that we have almost had a complete turnover in both CEs and almost a complete turnover of chairs in the industry sectors. So beef and lamb, dairy, the dairy industry and the horse industry. And I'm amazed at the level of collaboration that there is across a number of key points. One is to have a single voice for government, because I think that's really important. The second is a very strong commitment not to throw one another under the bus. So it's tempting when the finger's been pointed by the public rather at one sector than to maybe shadow under that, but to front foot agriculture as New Zealand Inc., because I think the public doesn't sit there and differentiate dairy from sheep, from beef, from horticulture. So that's critically important. And the third component, and particularly to the point of minimising duplication of your levy investment, is to use the skills we have across those organisations so that we get fewer, better people in kind of key areas, particularly around the environment, so that we're not all holding environmental scientists, etc. So collaboration is really essential, and we've got now, I guess, a leadership group within your other bodies that are equally focused on that.
Just one last question popped up there. Have you looked at other more efficient and easier to access models for extension for beef and lamb rather than having so many people on the ground?
Yeah, great question. I guess as I pointed to on that graph, it's the extension team is the single largest, and as we've said, the first step is to use that chatbot, which I think Dan, your team has done for less than the cost of one FTE in the team. So having digital availability, customising what we send to you, so we're spending about the equivalent of an FT on customer relationship management platforms, so that when we send information to you, it's based on the information that we know that you want, rather than just spamming you with information. So we are trying to coalesce the knowledge, data and information that we're getting out. So yeah, I would certainly hope that we're peaked at the extension team, and that we use technology to deliver customised information to you when and where you want it, or make it extremely easy for you to get that yourself.
Cool. We'll wrap that session up there. So thanks very much to Dan and Alan for all your thoughts.